Next, let's learn together from Roger and Abi Lowther, a husband and wife who are both serving at a church in downtown Tokyo, Japan. So we're here with Roger and Abi Lowther, and they are actually on vacation just north of Tokyo, Japan. And Roger is the founder and director of Community Arts Tokyo. He's also the director of Faith and Art at Grace City Church in Tokyo, and Abi is the director of worship there at that church. Roger and Abby, tell us a little bit about your story about how you came to serve there in Tokyo.
You want me to start?
Sure.
We are musicians, both of us, and we came on a 2-week mission trip. And then something happened that had never happened before. And afterwards, we got a call and said, "Hey, would you please come and live here for the rest of your life?" Which is kind of shocking to me because I had this vision that a missionary was someone who was a pastor, who had been to seminary. I went to a music conservatory, so did my wife. So it didn't even compute that that was an option. And so anyway, how could we refuse that? So after prayer and talking with a lot of people, we eventually did decide to.
And lots of time.
Yeah. And so we're 15 years now.
Wow. And you're at Grace City Church in downtown Tokyo. Tell us a little bit about the church, kind of the size and demographic. What does your church look like? What's the texture, the DNA?
Our church is walking distance from Tokyo Station, so it really is right at the epicenter of the largest city in the world. So many of the calculations for the greater city of Tokyo, the population is about 36, 37 million. So it's quite a challenge. Obviously, not everybody lives in the epicenter, but
there's
a lot of people come there.
Yeah, there was a huge need for churches there. Up to this point, most of the churches planted in Japan had been in the suburbs where people lived. But the problem with that is the Japanese work hour is so long that by the time they get home, it's too late to meet. And there was this big disjunct, between their family lives and their towns, and then their work life. And so the idea was to meet in a place where people are actually working, and so then they can bring their non-Christian friends in for, say, lunch meetings, lunch gatherings, dinner gatherings. And we found it's been hugely strategic.
A lot of our ministries function around the workspace, and so we have community groups over dinner, before they go home. And we have lunchtime meetings, like you mentioned, which is just a short Bible study for 30 minutes in the bottom of a huge business tower. And, there's many eating spaces that can be rented out for not too much in those workspaces, and people can gather there and be encouraged in the midst of their incredibly busy work hours.
And in some cases, their businesses have allowed us to use their conference rooms, which is quieter and more intimate. So that's been great.
That's really interesting. So, two questions I would have is this is difficult to stereotype, but you guys are in downtown Tokyo. So tell me a little bit about the spiritual climate there, just generally, but then also how has the pandemic, if at all, changed that? And it's really unique that you guys said you meet in at least small groups at lunch or at dinner or over meals. How has that been affected? So I guess that's three questions. One, the spiritual climate, but then how have you guys responded to that climate, and what's it look like right now?
In general, I would say the spiritual climate is open to Christianity, mostly because they don't know anything about Christianity. We've done just street interviews with people in, little putting videos together just to prove the point that people don't really know who Jesus is. You show a famous, Michelangelo painting of Jesus on the cross, and only 10% of the people can answer the question, who is this famous figure? And when you ask people who can answer the question, or if you tell them this is Jesus Christ, that famous figure in history, and that rings a bell often. And then you ask them, what do you know about him? And they often can only, give a couple of words, like he was a famous teacher, or he was a famous religious figure, or something about as much as maybe some Westerners would know about Buddha, I guess.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when COVID-19 hit, I think it was hard. I mean, in general, Japanese are cautious people. We wear masks throughout the year anyway, even without COVID-19. And so the numbers that kept going across the screen, from the news is just very scary. And so in terms of our church, in terms of gathering, that's why we had to so quickly say, okay, we're just going to meet online. There was a lot of scared people. Mm-hmm. And even now, it's going to be a while before we can gather again.
Yeah, part of the cultural issue there is Japanese think much more of the group than they do of the individual. So they put the group needs much higher than their individual needs. And if they think that they might be endangering the group, they will hold themselves back. So everyone automatically put masks on and started, disinfecting constantly. Yeah, people just automatically did not come to church. The other thing that goes into that is people live in multi-generational homes here. So they're living, the kids and the parents and the grandparents and the great-grandparents are all living in the same small house. There's no way to quarantine part of the house. And so if you want to protect the grandmother, they automatically, all of them don't go out. So you have a father teleworking, working online or doing his best to, social distance at work. And you have a mother who is keeping her kids away from everyone else, and they can't go to church because they would endanger the grandparents, and so they participate online. So most of our worship groups, as we call them now, worship stations, as we call them now, as we've been online since March 1st, are made up of multi-generational families, I would say. Even if not all of the family is a Christian, often they're not all Christians.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that kind of leads into this question about your response, how you guys have responded at Grace City Church in Tokyo to the pandemic. You mentioned that you've been meeting online since March, and you don't know even when that's going to end. And you even mentioned that you guys you call them worship groups. Tell me a little bit about what the texture of worshiping online, what does that look like for you? And I know we're all still kind of building the airplane while flying. I understand all that, but what's it kind of look like at the Grace City Church, Tokyo?
So as the worship director, I was the one that had to figure this out, at the beginning, and just thanking God for the people that he put around me that have the abilities and skills. I would say one of the driving factors for us, often when you do things online, you want to record ahead of time and make it look good and proper, and then send it out. And one of the driving factors for us was, again, that group mentality and that Japanese sense of all being the same and doing things the exact same way. They all wanted to actually be live online at the same time. And so we had to, from the beginning, keep a sense of that, even when we had to reduce down to where we couldn't have a band or someone singing at the location. We are still, even through the emergency declaration period, the pastor, the liturgist, the PowerPoint person, and the video guy, those four were all still live in the room. The pastor was speaking. We did end up recording the music ahead of time because we just had to reduce to that those numbers there. But we were able, the Japanese government has given the freedom to, there's no militia law here or mandates, extreme mandates. Everything is just by request. So we have the freedom to continue to gather those four people, but we were able to reduce it to those four.
So those four meet in wherever your worship space is, and then that's put online in addition to the pre-recorded music. Is that right?
Yes, that worship space was our living room.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well,
our church out in a building. We're in downtown and we rent a conference center. So that worship space was our living room. And at first we were able to gather the band there, a small band, and a few people who lived in the area, people who could walk or ride their bikes. We're downtown, so a lot of people are within biking distance, and Japanese are used to that. We used the members of the bands that lived close by, and we just use the same ones every week. But then in April, the end of April, I guess it was more early April. The Tokyo government issued an emergency declaration, and so we had to reduce numbers at that point and had to stop having the band come, stop having the singers sing live in the room, and we ended up recording a lot of music virtually, which I know what everyone's doing now, and then using that recorded music in the live stream setting with a live pastor and live liturgist.
Well, I can say from experience, and I know many people who are watching this can say that is a lot of work. So bless you and your team. I know you have a huge team making all that happen. What you mentioned that a lot of people at least in Tokyo and Japan, live in multi-generational housing. I'm just curious, has that sparked with family worship? Has more family worship been sparked because of this?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about that. We are still waiting to see what comes of in Japan, there are so few Christians that often the Christian is the only Christian in their family. And for example, I have one singer on my worship team that is the only Christian in her family. She has 3 siblings and her parents and her grandparents all in the same house. And she's the only Christian there. And, it's a very small house, and the only place she can live stream this worship is at her dining room table in the kitchen. I guess the kitchen and the dining room in the same room. And so she does that every Sunday. And she said it's been very interesting. Her family has encouraged her to do that. I think they feel that anything anybody can do that's encouraging for them during this time, is a good thing. But they have definitely been watching with interest around her as she worships right there in the middle of her non-Christian family every Sunday. And we have yet to see the impact of all of this. There are a lot of people watching, a lot of families watching.
Well, that's
what to say about that.
Well, just the fact, there's not, usually when people become Christians in Japan, they didn't grow up in a Christian family. They have no idea what that looks like. And so they don't have any model to go by about how would you do family worship.
Sure.
If you never see it demonstrated, it's a little bit awkward. You have to, how do we do this? And so we've basically been forcing it to happen by having online worship. They are all doing family worship around their computers. And so, yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how this grows in the future.
I think it's been a huge learning curve for every Christian and every Christian family around the country.
Has there been a particular hymn or song or collection of songs that have been meaningful, particularly to you guys in this time of your church?
I would say, in general, the ones that our church has written have become even more special. That our community is producing these songs, and Satomi wrote those lyrics, and to realize that the songs have even more power now, I'd say, because before there was a lot of, there's a lot of worship music happening. You may take it for granted, but now the thing that people are missing the most is wanting to be able to sing live in a group. People are longing for that now, and so the singing's even more special. And to say that, hey, this is our community that actually put these songs out there and is still continuing to write is really fun. We just, earlier this week, one of our members sent us a song saying, hey, what do you think about this? Would this work in worship? And we're interacting, and it's kind of fun. I was very excited.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, we made our first little music video for an online conference that we did for the entire nationwide Presbyterian Church. We can send you that video if you like.
Oh, absolutely. I'll put it in the resources. That'd be great.
Cool.
Well, it's great to hear the grace of Christ there on the ground in Tokyo, and it's. I was telling someone the other day that the gift technology is a gift. It is a grace, but it's what the Lord does through the people who use those tools that's nourishing, that's growing His church, and so grateful for that. Grateful for what you guys are doing in your team. Do you guys have any practical tips or anything? Any last words you'd like to give
Well,
to?
yeah, I wanted to add just the whole fact that we were planning to meet as a church again the end of this month. But we got back a bunch of stipulations from the hall saying, well, you have to do a certain number of things. You can't only one core of the chairs can be in the room, and they have to be spaced 2 meters apart, which means
So even families would have to social distance 2 meters apart.
Mhm.
No singing at all, even with masks on.
Wow.
No singing even on stage, even with a mask on. And no talking in the lobby.
no baptisms.
No baptism.
And we have 2 baptisms that are waiting to take
No
place.
communion. And so it really cut out most of the things that it means to be church. So we decided we still can't go.
Yeah, I mean, singing is such an important part of what it means to worship together that if we can meet in small worship stations and sing, or meet in a big setting and not sing, well, people are going to choose the smaller setting so that we can still sing.
Japanese love to sing.
Oh,
Yeah, I think as long as we're not allowed to sing in a large setting, then we're not going to be going back to a large setting until that changes.
Yeah. If you held a sing conference in Japan, you'd be impressed at how loud they sing.
Mhm.
sounds like a wonderful idea.
Yes.
Thank you, Roger and Abby. Really grateful for you guys and the work you're doing there.
Well, thanks for calling in.